Part 2. The Innocence of the Freed. The fire still burned low behind him, but its warmth never reached Seth. The chains had fallen, the monsters were gone, but his work, his truest purpose, was only now beginning. He turned slowly back toward the freed, dozens of them, hollow-eyed, shivering, watching him with fear and something close to awe. Their silence was heavier than the battle, as if they were afraid that speaking might break the spell that had shattered their cages. Seth stepped forward, blood still wet on his blade, and sheathed it without ceremony. He did not speak of what he had done. He only looked at them, and then, without planning to, without knowing why, he said, "No more chains. Arkenfel's princess, Avarenya, decrees it so." He paused. The words had escaped before he knew they were coming. They were not hers. She had never spoken them, and yet he knew them to be true. Because she didn't need to say it, as she was already living it. Because somewhere deep inside, Seth had decided she was already worthy to be a queen. He would carry those words, her new decree. He would give her crown to the world before she even asked for it, and in doing so, he would reshape the world in her image. His sword, still glowing faintly white-hot from the fury that had not yet cooled, hummed at his side. A spirit bound to purpose. He unsheathed it, not to raise it, but to lower it gently to the chains that still bound wrists and ankles. One by one, he pressed the flat of the blade to the manacles. The metal sizzled, cracked, and fell away with a hiss, recoiling from the purity of his wrath. When the bindings were leather, he didn't hesitate. He tore them with his bare hands, the effort biting into his skin, splitting knuckles and bending his fingers. He welcomed the pain. It was payment. It was deserved. He moved without a word, his silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the sword, the firelight catching the worn features of the freed, faces gaunt, limbs trembling, and eyes dull with trauma. Every step forward was a step deeper into the grief that wrapped around his throat like a collar of its own. Then he saw the children, their arms no thicker than kindling, bruises blooming like ink across their skin, eyes too old for their age. Some flinched as he approached, others didn't even react. And that broke something. His breath hitched. Just once, just enough. He dropped to a knee in front of a boy who couldn't have been more than 6. The child stared blankly, a healing lash mark running across his collarbone. No tears, just silence. Seth reached out, slowly, placing his hand on the shackle. As it broke away, something inside Seth threatened to break too. "I should have come sooner," he thought. I should have been here." The thought repeated like a war drum inside him. "This is beyond redemption, beyond forgiveness. They were children, and I was too late." The weight of it bled from his posture, poured from the spaces between his armor, something raw and ancient and human. The fury from before was righteous, but this was devastation. He stood slowly, trembling with restraint, and continued down the line. Another chain, another child, another crack in his heart. One little girl, no older than 5, tried to lift her injured and calloused wrists when he knelt before her. She looked at him, not with fear, but with a question so pure it carved through him like a blade. Are you here to take us home?" He almost broke. His voice faltered as he answered, barely above a whisper. "Yes, child, I am." It was all he could give, all he could promise. It was enough for her. She smiled. She smiled, and he felt like this was where he was meant to be. He did not move, because he couldn't, because in that moment the wrath of 1,000 storms could not have moved him. And for the first time in his life, he felt no need to keep moving and seek his next fight. just the need to be the place where something this innocent felt safe. "Gather yourselves," he said. "You will come with me." He saw hesitation, felt their fear and their confusion. "I will take you to Arkenfel's army. Their war camp is nearby. They will feed you, clothe you, tend to your many wounds." Still some hesitated, until, "What if we don't want to go?" The voice belonged to a man, his courage returning to him. He was holding a child so tightly it pained him to see it. Seth looked at him, not just with understanding, but with the weight of someone who had longed for a home and couldn't find his way back. So he simply nodded. "Then I will take you wherever you need to go. Every last one of you." No orders, no demands, just a promise. Because war was no longer the purpose here. These people were. Then she stepped forward. She was so tiny, no taller than his hip. Her small hand uncurled from her father's, and she walked to him. No fear, but with certainty. And for the first time since the beginning of his path, since the first blood stained his hands, Seth was entirely unsure of what to do. She stood before him, head tilted back, eyes impossibly wide, and asked, "Who made you so brave and strong?" The world stood still, a breath, a heartbeat, silence. "Was it someone like my daddy? Then, did they make you an angel?" Seth couldn't breathe, not for pain, but for something far, far more terrifying. He wanted to answer. The words would not come. Because what could he say to such purity that mistook him for light? He knelt slowly, carefully, lowered himself to her level, and with a voice that trembled in ways his blade never had, he whispered, "I am not an angel, little one." His throat tightened around the words. "Your bravery is beyond what my old mentor, Gracchus, instilled into me." Her eyes sparkled before him. "Your daddy," he forced the word out. It felt foreign in his mouth. "He is the bravest of all. He never gave up. He held on through everything for you." He looked at her, his expression softer than it had ever been. "I only came to keep the promise he made to you." He paused, his breath caught between the ash of battle and the warmth of something he couldn't name. "I am the initiate. I fight for people like him, and for little ones like you." And then she stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his leg, clung to him. He felt so warm to her, and she did not know how else to thank him. Seth did not move, felt no need to recoil. For the first time in his arrival to Telebranus, someone had not feared him, and he did not know what to do with that. A quiet stillness had just begun to settle when the sound of hooves broke the silence. Torches appeared along the tree line, flickering in the night like stars drawn down to witness something sacred. The Arkenfellan soldiers arrived in cautious formation, their weapons lowered, their expressions uncertain. They had followed Seth's path east, expecting blood and ruin. They had not expected this. Their boots fell silent when they saw him. Seth stood in the center of the camp, surrounded not by corpses, but by survivors, freed souls, children clinging to his legs. Men and women looking to him as if they beheld the edge of some divine story passed down in whispers. Valstar was among them. He said nothing at first. He simply looked at Seth, and Seth did not look back. He was kneeling beside a small boy, gently freeing the last of his bindings. His hands trembled slightly now, not from battle, but from something deeper, something breaking and rebuilding all at once. Valstar lowered his head. "What can we do to help, Initiate?" Seth stood slowly. "Give them aid. They need caring for. Bring blankets, water, food, and no questions. Not tonight." The soldiers moved immediately, quietly, reverently. Not a one asked what had happened here. It wasn't needed. They could feel it. This had not been a battle. It was something else entirely. It was the initiate becoming more than the tool he always thought he was. The march back to camp was quiet in the way that carried weight. The only sounds were the slow, even steps of the Arkenfellan soldiers, the softer shuffling of the freed slaves, and the occasional clinking of armor or shifting of weapons. The cool night air pressed around them, thick with the remnants of fire and blood, though the smoke had long since faded into the vast stretch of darkness above. The stars remained indifferent to the suffering below, twinkling in the vast abyss of the heavens, untouched by the world's pain. The freed had walked hesitantly at first. Even without chains, they seemed wary, their steps slow and uncertain, their eyes darting toward the shadows as if expecting their captors to rise from the grave and reclaim them. Some clutched at their ragged garments, as though without the weight of iron upon them, they were somehow less real, less whole. But as the slow march continued, something began to shift. The further they moved from the site of their torment, the more they began to feel the absence of it. Shoulders straightened, footsteps became firmer. A few even dared to look up at the sky, at the endless stars they had been too afraid to admire before. And then, like the hesitant dawn creeping over a battlefield, the first quiet voices rose among them. Voices, small, hesitant at first, began to rise among the children. It started as a whisper, uncertain and fragile, barely noticeable beneath the soft footfalls of their journey. A timid breath of sound, hesitant as if speaking freely was something that could be taken away. But then, like the first cracks of dawn after a storm, the children spoke again. Soft at first, their voices mingling with the night, uncertain if they had the right to be heard. Yet, as moments passed and no reprimand came, their voices grew, rippling outward with cautious excitement, like a flame rekindled after long darkness. Their curiosity was too strong to be contained by fear, too natural to be restrained by the horrors they had endured. The young girl, no older than 5 or 6, her tangled curls bouncing as she walked beside her father, tugged on his sleeve. Her small fingers gripped the worn fabric, hesitant but determined, as if anchoring herself to something real. Her voice, still raw from disuse, held a quiet reluctance, yet, within it, the unfiltered purity of child's curiosity broke through, like sunlight piercing the morning mist. Where are we going?" she asked, looking up at the towering forms of the soldiers around her. Her father, walking beside her, placed a protective hand on her shoulder, his fingers gentle despite the shake in them. He looked down at her with tired eyes that had seen too much, and yet they softened as he spoke. "I'm not sure, sweetie," he admitted, his voice rough with exhaustion. "But I think we'll be safe now." A grizzled soldier walking beside them, his armor dull from years of wear, glanced down and answered gruffly, but not unkindly. "To our war camp, little one. You'll all be fed, given a place to sleep. Then you'll have a choice to make." Choice? The word was foreign on her tongue, like something she wasn't sure she was allowed to speak aloud. The soldier hesitated, glancing at Valstar, who walked behind them. The commander did not turn, but his voice carried back to them, clear and firm. "Those who wish to return to their homes will be escorted back. Those who have none to return to will find a new home in Arkenfell." There was a murmur among the freed, the quiet but filled with something new. Hope. Another child, a boy who had been listening intently, took a breath before asking, "What is Arkenfell?" A younger soldier named Hellar smiled faintly. "It's our home. If you choose it, yours too. Princess Avarenya awaits our return. She'll look after you all." The children weren't satisfied with that answer. They wanted more. Then, the smallest among them, the girl who had spoken first, suddenly gasped with realization.
"Oh, the angel lady lives there."
A few of the soldiers exchanged glances. "Angel lady?" one of them repeated, amused. The little girl nodded with conviction, her tiny hands still clutching the candies she had received earlier.
"The princess. She's gotta be the bestest woman ever,"
she declared, handing out the sweets the old and gruff-looking soldier, Elric, had handed her before to the children beside her, sharing freely as if she had never once been without.
"She sent him to save us."
There was no need to ask who he was. Seth walked ahead, silent as ever, his steps never faltering. He did not turn, did not react, but the weight of the little girl's words reached him all the same.
"She's more prettier than angels,"
the child continued, her voice bubbling with innocent excitement.
"She sent him strong uncles and big brothers to save us."
A chuckle came from one of the soldiers, rough but genuine. There was something about the way she spoke that made the exhaustion in their bones just a little lighter. And as if her words carried a magic none could resist, the weight of the march lifted, if only just slightly. Another child, a boy that looked the same age as the girl, frowned, his small face scrunching with thought. His large, dark eyes, still hollowed by the weight of loss, held the kind of seriousness that young children forced to understand death could carry. A mess of unruly brown hair framed his thin face, his cheeks still rounded with lingering baby fat despite the gauntness of hunger. He stood with his arms crossed tightly over his small chest, his bare feet scuffing against the dirt as if trying to ground himself.
"She can't be an angel,"
he said seriously, his voice firm with certainty beyond his years.
"My mommy's an angel, 'cause she flew to heaven when I was sleeping."
A hush fell over the soldiers. The little girl tilted her head, considering his words in that deep, thoughtful way only children could. Then, with a smile so soft it seemed to carry all the warmth the night lacked, she spoke.
Then she is Auntie Avarenya,"
she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world.
"Since your mommy is the angel, I wonder if your mommy helped mine get to heaven. My daddy says she flew away after she closed her eyes and wouldn't open them no more."
The boy's eyes widened, a flicker of emotion passing through them. He looked at the sweet in his hand, the last one she had given him. But as he turned his gaze back to her, he saw something beyond her small, unwavering smile. He saw the deep sorrow buried in her eyes, a sadness too heavy for someone so young. And yet, she was trying so hard to make him feel better, to push past her own pain to ease his. She had lost as much as he had, and yet she offered him comfort without hesitating. Behind her, her father stood, his face a mask of restraint. His shoulders trembled, his breath caught in his throat, but he refused to make a sound. Tears streamed down his face, silent and unchecked, as he bore witness to the kindness of his daughter, to the strength she showed despite the weight of grief pressing upon her tiny frame. Slowly, the boy broke the sweet in half, his small fingers shaking as he held out the bigger piece to her, not just as a gesture of thanks, but as a promise that he, too, would try.
"I think our mommies would have flew together,"
he said quietly, his voice barely more than a whisper, but filled with all the certainty he could muster.
"Like friends. Maybe we should be too."
The little girl beamed, her entire face lighting up as if she had been given something greater than just words. She took the piece he gave her, cradling it in her small hands like a treasure before nodding eagerly.
"Okay, bestest friends, forever."
Her voice carried a joy so unshaken, so untouched by hesitation, that for a brief moment, the burdens carried by those around them felt lighter. Some of the freed smiled through their grief, others wiped away silent tears, and even a few soldiers, hardened by war, found their shoulders relaxing just slightly, as if the very innocence of the exchange had chipped away at their exhaustion. Several of them turned their faces away, pretending to adjust their armor or rub their eyes beneath their helmets. But the truth was clear. This moment, this fleeting instance of purity, had moved even them. One soldier, his battle-worn hands gripping the hilt of his sword, exhaled shakily as he wiped at his eyes with the back of his wrist, unwilling to let anyone see the moisture there. Another, his face a mask of stoicism, swallowed thickly as he glanced down at the children, his mind far from the battlefield, and instead on a memory long buried, one perhaps not so different from this. For the first time that night, laughter rang through the freed, not forced, not cautious, but real, a sound so pure it felt almost foreign in the night's heavy air, yet welcome, as if it had been waiting all along to return. And then the little girl turned her wide, trusting eyes up to the soldiers, her small face glowing with curiosity, completely innocent to the gravity of what she was about to say. Her bright, round eyes, full of wonder, flickered between them, her tiny hands gripping the edges of her worn tunic, as if holding on to the only thing that made sense in this strange world. Despite the weight that had settled over the march, despite the hushed reverence the soldiers carried, she spoke as children do, without hesitation, without fear, and without realizing the impact her words would have.
"Did Papa Gracchus teach you all to be brave too?"
The reaction was instant. Armor shifted, boots stumbled. The very air itself seemed to halt. The freed, unfamiliar with the weight of that name, merely continued walking, unbothered by the sudden change in atmosphere. But the soldiers, their commander, Halor Alric, they knew. That name did not belong to this world, did not belong in this march. That name had only ever been spoken by the Berserkian, uttered with reverence, carried like a ghost among the war-torn demeanor of the initiate. And in all of Telebranus, he was the only one that ever spoke that name. Seth stopped walking. Slowly, he turned, marching directly toward the small group of children with purpose. Though there was no aggression in his stride, still, his presence carried an undeniable weight, a silent force that made the others huddle together out of instinct, their young minds sensing something unknown in the way he moved. But the little girl? She did not flinch. She did not shy away. Her bright eyes remained locked onto him, her wide, unwavering smile still stretched across her face, as if his approach was nothing more than a friend coming to greet her. It was only the boy beside her, fists clenched at his side, trembling but resolute, who stepped forward as if to protect the others. Before Seth could kneel, the little boy, her new friend, stepped in front of her and the others, his small fists clenched so tightly at his sides that his knuckles turned white, his thin frame trembling with fear. Yet he stood firm, his lips pressed into a tight line, his breath coming out in short, shaky bursts, but he did not falter. He was terrified, and Seth could see it plainly, the way his knees threatened to buckle, the way his body wanted to shrink back. And yet, despite all of that, he stayed where he was, because no matter how small he was, no matter how powerless he should have felt in the face of a figure as imposing as Seth, he would not let this towering warrior frighten or harm his friends. He would stand, because that was what he believed he had to do. The little girl, seeing his shaking hands, shuffled closer to him and gently took his hand in hers, squeezing it as if to reassure him. She smiled up at him and said,
"Don't worry, he looks scary, but he's really, really nice."
Seth knelt, bringing himself to their level, though still a giant compared to them. His voice was calm, measured. His eyes lingered on the boy who had stepped forward, fists clenching, trembling, yet unyielding. For a moment, Seth saw something rare, something that could not be taught, only born into the soul. True bravery, Not the kind that came from strength or experience, but the kind that bloomed in the heart despite fear. His gaze softened ever so slightly. "You are braver than you know," he said, his voice steady, but now carrying a weight it did not before. "Very few have ever stood before me as you have." Seth let the words settle, feeling their truth as he looked at the boy. His hands had shaken, his breath had trembled, but he had not moved. That kind of bravery, resolute, instinctive, and selfless, was something even men 30 years his senior did not often possess. Seth knew warriors who had faltered where this boy had stood. A quiet breath escaped him before he spoke again, this time more slowly, deliberately. "Gracchus, he would have approved of you. He would have seen what I see now." But as the words left him, there was something deeper beneath them, something he could not name, a sorrow unspoken, a regret too large to be put into words. Because he could say Gracchus would have approved, but would Gracchus have approved of himself? The boy blinked, his small chest rising with something between fear and pride. Seth let the words settle, but the weight of his own words pressed down on him. He did not wish to speak of Gracchus, not because the great Berserkian did not deserve it, but because Seth did not feel worthy of uttering his name, not after what he had done to him, not after what he had failed to do for him. And yet he spoke, because even if the burden of guilt and grief burned within him, Gracchus must be known. His name must live on beyond the Brotherhood, beyond the battles that had forged him into legend. These children, they should know. No, little ones. Gracchus did not teach them, only me. His voice was steady, but within it, something deep lingered. A sorrow unspoken, refused to be voiced here. He hesitated, struggling to find the right words, something that would give them comfort without dishonoring those they had lost. "He marched to where your angel mothers are. He watches over them. He stands guard at the very gates of heaven itself. Because men like him, warriors like him, do not rest, not even in the next life. He protects them, not just because they are there, but because they have given this world something precious. A young man with bravery beyond his years, like a Berserkian. A young lady with a heart as fierce and strong as any Berserkian." Seth exhaled slowly, forcing himself to continue. His gaze shifted between their small, innocent faces, and he tried so hard to make them see how grand of a truth this was. "He does not merely watch, little ones. He stands, and nothing could ever best him." Before those words could settle, the little girl tilted her head slightly, her expression filled with innocent curiosity. Her eyes wide, shimmering with a child's endless wonder, searched Seth's face as if expecting him to hold every answer in the world. She clutched the edges of her tunic, her small fingers twisting the fabric, a subconscious attempt to steady herself.
What made him go then?"
she asked, her voice soft but certain, yet carrying a hint of something fragile, as though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. She blinked up at him, waiting, hopeful in a way that made Seth's chest feel heavier than all the armor and weapons he had ever carried. Seth barely had time to process that before the little boy, her new friend, spoke next.
"Did he get sick like Mama did?"
Seth's throat tightened. He had faced down horrors from beyond the veil of sanity, slain creatures that had no right to exist, and waged war against forces that sought to break an entire world. And yet, these small, innocent questions threatened to undo him, because he could not tell them the truth, because the truth was that he had murdered Gracchus. Or so his fractured memories whispered to him in the dead of the night, that he had left him to die, abandoned his mentor, his guide, his only true measure of a father, that in his shame, in his failure, he had turned and fled the battle like a coward. But was it the truth? The gaps in his memories were like wounds that never fully healed, and within them, doubt festered, clawing at him like a specter of his own making. The weight of it crushed him, clawed at his chest, coiling around his ribs like iron bands. His breath felt shallow, uneven, his hands briefly flexing as though seeking a weapon that he could fight the ghosts within him, and, for a moment, he thought he might not be able to answer at all. And then, from behind, a breathless voice cut through the moment.
"Your Papa Gracchus is the one who stands guard at the gates to heaven."
Thorak's voice came steady, carrying over the group like a protective shield. He had arrived just in time, as he always did, sparing Seth from the question that had nearly shattered him. He stepped forward, his tone measured, deliberate, answering the children not just for their sake, but for Seth's as well.
"Your initiate's mentor decided he no longer liked the idea of Heaven's Gate standing unguarded,"
Thorak continued, his words unwavering and kind, but edged with something more, something meant for them and Seth. He let the weight of the words settle before he spoke again, his voice carrying the reverence of a tale worth telling.
"So the great Berserkian, Lord Brother Gracchus, stood before the Reaper, crossed his arms, and told it that Heaven's Gate had stood unguarded for too long, that such a thing was unacceptable. And when the Reaper asked him why he thought he could change that, Gracchus simply grinned, the way only the mightiest of warriors do, and said, 'Try and stop me.' And so, as the Reaper knew better than to try, he marched through the Vale, not as a man passing from this world, but as a warrior claiming his rightful post, ensuring that no soul who deserved peace would ever fear the unknown again."
Thorak glanced towards Seth then, his eyes knowing, understanding in a way no one else could. He knew what he had just done, what he had just created. Not truth, but something the children needed, something Seth would have never allowed himself to say, even if it was for their sake. Seth couldn't have lied like this, couldn't bring himself to craft the words, even to ease their hearts. But Thorak knew this moment wasn't about truth. It was about the children, about giving them something to hold on to, a belief to grasp in the face of everything that had been taken from them. And despite himself, Seth felt the weight in his chest shift, if only slightly, because this was the version of Gracchus he had once believed in too. As a child, he might have seen such a story as reality, a version of Gracchus that was larger than life, unconquerable, undefeated, unwavering. And maybe, just maybe, a part of him wanted to believe it still. Thorak had woven a legend where Seth could only see regret. He had given the children something to believe in, something to hold on to, because he knew Seth would never burden them with his own sins, could not bear to let them see the cracks in his soul. Seth exhaled, feeling the relief of being spared, if only for a moment. Thorak had always known when to step in, when to take the words Seth could not bring himself to say. And in this moment, Thorak was not just answering the children, he was saving Seth from drowning in his own past. Thorak. As always, since their first battle together, Thorak had given Seth the words he could not find. And in that moment, Seth knew he had found the closest thing to a brother he would ever have in this world. The inn had quieted. The hearth still burned, though lower now, embers pulsing with slow fading light. Most of the room sat in reflective silence. Some held their mugs between both hands, their food long since forgotten. Others looked down, eyes wet with the weight of things unspoken. The children had fallen asleep, curled beside their mother on a bench near the fire. One of them, the girl, still clutched a scrap of cloth in her hand, as though holding on to the edge of a dream. The storyteller sat back, gaze turned not toward the hearth this time, but to the frost-covered windows. Beyond them lay darkness, but in here, within these worn walls and old beams, something sacred had lingered. "A reckoning," he murmured at last, mostly to himself. "A salvation. Both must be carried." He stood slowly, joints creaking, the tankard lifted in a quiet salute to the listeners still awake. "Remember this, friends," he said softly. "Sometimes the sharpest blade leaves no wound, and the gentlest hand saves a world." He smiled, nodding once to the innkeeper. "Keep the fire warm." He paused then, his eyes lingering on the children once more. A soft whisper, barely above breath, passed his lips. "She would have smiled at this night. Avarenya always knew the heart mattered as much as the sword." And with that, the storyteller stepped back towards the shadows of the inn, where stories rest until they are called again. End of tale. To be continued. If the tale stirred something within you, let it echo outward. Whisper it to another. Pass it on like flame between torches. That is how legends grow. There will be more stories waiting here, bound in ash, bound in blood, bound in hope. So when the world grows quiet and the fire burns low, you'll know where to return. Until then, spread the flame.